speaker is Dr. Luciana Esteves, and she is an associate professor at the Bournemouth University in physical geography. She has a BSc in oceanography, an MSc in geology, and a PhD in marine science. She worked as a professor in Brazil before moving to the UK and taking up a position as a research fellow at the University of Plymouth. Her research focuses on coastal changes that are driven by natural and human-induced processes. She's an executive on the committee of Women in Coastal Geosciences and Engineering Network, and a member of the Bournemouth University Women Academic Network. So Luciana's talk is going to be slightly different, and she's going to tell us about the results of a survey that she was involved in, which was conducted to understand the impact of COVID-19 on the work-life balance of academics. So I think this is going to be really interesting. I can't wait to hear the results of that. So Luciana, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. There you go.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you hear me and see the screen well?
Yes, all good.
Oh, that's the wrong screen. So which screen are you seeing?
We can see your PowerPoint presentation.
Brilliant. Good.
So there's a map up there.
That's brilliant. That's the correct one then. Thank you.
So you could just maybe do the slideshow and it'll go even bigger for you then. Perfect.
Brilliant. So I wasn't sure exactly what I was supposed to be talking about today. So I did a mix of things, and we will leave the results of the survey to the end. Like many of the colleagues that have been sharing their experiences today, my life probably was not sort of linear, was quite ups and downs, zigzags, and moving around the world, as you can see in this map. So here you see that's my Bermuda Triangle here. So I was born in South Brazil, and I worked my first academic position there. I'm going to talk a bit about it. I did my master in Florida. Then in 2006, I moved to the UK. So it's been about 80 years that I've been here. So at the moment, I am at Bournemouth University as an associate prof. And what I'm going to tell you about now is a bit of my journey, and then all the bits and pieces I've been doing. So you see that I'm not a person that does one thing, and I'm not saying that anyone should do what I do, because it's really tiring and stressful. So we will go through that in a moment. So in terms of my degrees, I did oceanography in Brazil. It's right in the south of Brazil, southernmost state part of Brazil. Since I was 10 years old, I said I was going to be an oceanographer. Don't ask me if I could say oceanography back then, but you know, I was in love with Jacques Cousteau documentaries that I saw on TV, and I wanted to know more about the sea and stuff like that. Maybe because I was born up in the mountains. I don't know. I had that fascination about the sea. Then I did my master in Florida. I wanted to do something about coastal erosion and coastal protection. So I went there. I'm going to say a few things about it. And then I returned to Brazil and did my PhD there in the Institute of Geosciences in that university here. Now, if I tell you a bit about my employment, I got my first permanent academic position when I was 21. So I've been doing this thing for quite a long time. Really, it feels quite a long time, most of the time nowadays, really. And it was quite interesting because the oceanography degree there, at the time I studied, you could choose to be a biological oceanographer or a geological oceanographer. And I chose the path of the geological oceanography. And I graduated at the end of 1990. And then I needed to do few more modules to graduate also as a biological oceanographer. So I stayed there while organizing my master, or a place for a master, and I was going to go and do geochemistry at the mouth of the Amazon River as my master. And then there was a position there at university that opened, and I applied to it, and it was not straightforward as you might imagine, but I got that position. So I stopped, I didn't finish my degree as a biological oceanographer, and took that position. And it was quite interesting because some of my colleagues that I started university with became my students. So I had, in my first class, I had ex-boyfriends and you know, people I shared room with in the past. And it was quite scary. I thought, they are not going to respect me, they are not going to listen to me, and so on. And it was quite the opposite. So these guys were really cool and really, you know, helped me get settled and get my teaching experience. It was actually the first years that I had trouble with, because they didn't see me as a lecturer. They saw me as one of them, and that was a bit of a clash there. But it's quite an interesting experience. But I can tell you that in the first few weeks, I got home completely exhausted and would go straight to bed. I couldn't do anything else. You know, it was really, really tiring. So after that, I went to do my master, and soon after I got my son. My son was born soon after I returned to Brazil. Of course, I had a leave from work to go and do my master. And when I came back, I had my son and resumed my job at university, the same university there. So I worked there until 2006, when I came to the UK. So I took another leave from work to do my PhD. But in the first year, I still had to teach. And this university here is about 360 kilometers from this one. So I moved home, but I had to return every Monday to that place here to actually teach my classes, and then come back. So my son was 2 years old when I started my PhD, so I had to resort from my mom to come and help. Every Sunday evening, she would come and stay with my son. So at 6 in the morning on a Monday, I would be able to go back to my university there to teach from 10 in the morning to 6 in the evening, get the bus back to return home to stay then the rest of the week and resume my activities on my PhD, and of course take care of my son. So I would stay home with him in the morning, take him to the nursery and kindergarten, and then go in the afternoon after lunch, and then go to university to work on my PhD. And of course, after coming home, after he went to bed, doing all the research that we do at late hours up to 1, 2 in the morning to get things done. So when I was doing my PhD, I went to a conference in Florida, and I met my husband, my current husband, you know, the son of my father. We split when my son was 5 months old. So I went to this conference, met my current husband there, And then things started to get a bit interesting in my life. So when I finished my PhD, I resigned from my position in Brazil, where I worked for 14 years, and accepted a position as a research fellow at Plymouth University, where my husband got a position as a professor. So we stayed there for 4 years. My husband was a researcher from the National Environment Research Council previously, and he didn't really like the teaching bits of the academic world, and he decided to go for consultancy. So in 2010, he took a different job, and then I had to find a different job as well. So I resigned from the position in Plymouth and got a temporary contract as a research fellow in London at a university that was not doing very well then, London Met. It was a 2-year contract on a Framework 7 European project. I didn't have anything to do with university apart from that research I had to do. And when it was about a year into my contract and I knew the contract was going to end, I started looking for jobs. I couldn't find anything. So my life was really, really, really turbulent then. I thought, not going to get anywhere here in Britain, not finding a job. What am I going to do? So I thought abandoning academia for the first time in my life, after working 20 years almost in academia. Then luckily, I got this job at Bournemouth University as a lecturer in 2012. So actually I didn't have any break in my academic career so far. I never had a sabbatical either. So, you know, it really feels tiring at some times, but then you get to do your research and you get to enjoy yourself again. So my work is quite varied. I've done lots of different things. You can see here all the topics I've sort of engaged with, the sort of skills that I use, the locations where I had my research, my study sites, the types of coasts I have used. So it's quite varied, but always about coasts. I love coasts. I go to the coast as holiday, I go to the coast to walk, and that's what I like to do. But it doesn't matter what I like to do or study about coastlines. So that is my main thing. I'm a coastal scientist, but more and more my work became interdisciplinary and more away from the sediments and more closer to interdisciplinary, mixing the hazards, exposure with social vulnerability. So that is what I like to do, and that's how I see myself looking at coastal exposure, coastal risks, flooding, erosion, extreme events, climate change impacts, and the impacts on people. So briefly, my master here is, I went to Florida to learn about beach nourishment. It was a very new thing in the 1990s. So I did do a lot of different things. I calculated erosion rates for the whole of the sandy part of the Florida coast. That's over 1,200 kilometers. Then I mapped the urban development and environmental concerns, produced really nice maps for each one of the counties there in Florida. And as a result of that, we had a few papers, and I was invited to be co-author of 2 books about living in the coasts along the coast of Florida. And that was really nice because sort of showed that I did a good job with my master. Then my PhD, I returned as well. I was in Brazil. So that is the state where I was born, where I was working, and where I did my PhD as well. The coastline of this state is 613 kilometers long. And we have these two big lagoons here. Pat's Lagoon is one of the longest lagoons in the world, 250 kilometers long, 40 kilometers wide. And the interesting thing about this coastline is pretty much continuous. So this part here is actually in the Guinness Book of Records. It's the longest sandy beach in the world. There's 220 kilometers with no permanent interruption in here. So here we have the Pathos Lagoon inlet, and there's one inlet around here, permanent inlet. But mainly what I did in my PhD is that I drove along all this coastline doing DGPS surveys along, mapping the shoreline, and then mapping, again, it's a pristine outer coastline, the level of urbanization, where the urbanization was, doing some beach topography there. And what we did then is mapping the shoreline change along that 600-kilometer coastline. And you can see that in different times, it's almost like a mirror. It seems that the shoreline had a memory, always returning to places there, particularly in this northern part. Then we decided to do some modeling about the sediment transport and analyzing the effects of El Niño and La Niña in that coastline. Then we did some, to validate this model, we did lots of sediment trapping here with the help of students, of course. In these days, we didn't care much about health and safety, as you can see here. We had some floaters there to track the longshore currents, to validate the model, quantify sediment transport. And this continued after I moved to the UK, few papers there about my PhD. Again, a book came out from that, and we continued this work after moving to the UK. So I mentioned to you that after a few years in Plymouth and then getting that job in London, temporary job, I thought I was not going to be able to get a different job after that. So I said, well, I'm going to write a book while I try to find a job. So I started looking at managerial realignment, wrote a book about it. So that is when you start removing coastal protection and let the coastline to behave more naturally. So that was published, but then I was already at Bournemouth when that happened. And as I said, that was a troublesome time for me, really, thinking that you had to give up your career after so many tough decisions I had to make. Just very quickly now, some recent work using X-band radar, remote sensing to monitor what goes on here in the near shore and also the shoreline. Did lots of laser scanning, check topography, and then this became a PhD project as well that the PhD student finished. He did a lot of sediment analysis and topography. So this bit is here, this bit is in front of the coastal defenses here, and you can see that's a very, very changeable and dynamic coastline. And this is a project that's current, funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and it's looking at East Africa. So we are looking at Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Kenya, and it's about the threats to cultural heritage and how can we make cultural heritage a sustainable way of supporting the coastal communities there for their livelihoods. And my main parts of in this project is that we are looking at, we created like an index of coastal exposure along that coastline. You can see how the reds here is coastal districts that have more than 50% of the coastline at high or very high exposure. And then we used also combined with social vulnerability, looking at 10 indicators of social vulnerability to create what we call the index of vulnerability to coastal change. And the darker shades here are the coastal districts that are more vulnerable, really. And this is to present coastal hazards. We're not even talking about climate change. So that's a bit of the things I do. It's a bit of a crazy thing. You know, I can never keep up with the literature. It's too many things, many different things I do. And from time to time, I also do this sort of social science surveys. So back in March, when lockdown started, I thought, well, you know, hearing from colleagues, so many different experiences. Some people are thinking, yay, you know, working from home, that's brilliant. Some others are saying, I don't have a desk, I don't have a space, you know, I have all my family around me. We don't have a computer to work on. So how do I do it? I cannot do anything. So many contrasting things. And I said, well, someone has to be collecting some data. And I looked online, couldn't find any survey about academics. I found surveys about students and things like that, but not about the work-life balance of academics. Later on, there were some surveys about how research was affected and the activities were affected, but not necessarily the work-life balance. So I contacted some colleagues from the social science side and from public health at Bournemouth, and in collaboration with two colleagues, we put out a survey. We applied for funding to do it better and bigger, but we didn't get it. So we did it in our own time, really, disseminating the link via social media and analyzing when we could. So I don't have a lot to show you because we don't have time as well. I will send you, well, there's a link here where you can find a blog that I talk about this. And what you can see here is just one question of that questionnaire, the answers to one question. And you can see that considering all the responses we got, all the valid responses we got, or usable responses, about 57% of respondents have said that their work-life balance during lockdown got worse. 39% said it got better. So people's experiences are very different. And you can see here it's different between females and males. So many more women are saying that their work-life balance got worse. But surprisingly, there is no statistically significant difference between male and female. We looked also at with children and without children, or with young children. There is no significant difference between the groups, probably because of the difference in numbers. So that's a sampling effect that goes on in here. What we did find is that there is a significant difference in terms of household size. It seems that if you are in a household of 3 people, is the optimal. So it's more, as a larger percentage of respondents say work-life balance has improved during lockdown, and a similar percentage as the other groups think work-life balance got worse. Here is just to show that what you see here is that I looked at UK respondents and non-UK respondents, and there's also a bit, you know, the British are a bit worse off, but there's no statistical significant difference there. And I looked also the female and male respondents, UK based, and again, not a statistically significant difference, but you can see there are differences. You know, there's more women saying the work-life balance got worse. And here's a bit more detail, so people could select the reason why work-life balance had improved or got worse. And you can see here the largest selection there, or the largest number of people, or proportion of people have said that workload increased, and that is more, or a larger proportion of women said that. While for men, they have the largest proportion actually said that work-life balance had improved because they could do what they needed to do and could be at home with family. So there are differences there, but they are not statistically significant differences. So there's quite a lot of things here to think about. And of course, there's many more things that came out of this survey. And the main reason, of course, that people have said that work-life balance has improved is either because they didn't have to commute. So it's about 2-3 hours for some people where they could stay at home, so they could concentrate more what matters instead of facing the traffic and dealing with all the issues that goes on with travel. And also some other people said they had more time to take care of themselves. They like the flexibility of working at different hours. And for some people, it has reduced the number of what they said pointless meetings and pointless admin and so on. In contrast, you have lots of people that couldn't do anything because they didn't have any conditions to do anything. So it's not about numbers. So this thing, to understand this, is not only about numbers. So the quantitative data gives you something, but it's the qualitative data that really, really gives you an understanding of what is going on there. So actually, inequalities increased immensely. Because imagine that employers provide equal conditions for people to work, or similar conditions for people to work when they are on campus or at the office, but everyone's home is quite different. So there is a huge inequality there. And for the people that have issues, those issues are immense. So it's not necessarily to suit the majority that you have to look at, but to help those people that are the most affected. And what can you do to help them? Really is one of the key things that we see as the outcome of this survey. Not sure why it's coming out blank. Do you see out blank as well? So I don't know what's happening here,
Yeah.
but yeah, there was some figures in there. I don't know exactly what happened. So perhaps if I just end the slideshow and return to the normal screen, it will come. It is not coming. That's interesting. I can see it here, but I cannot make it go there. So, interesting. So the other survey we've done was about women in coastal geosciences and engineering, a survey in 2016 it started, and we published a paper, and we came out with 7 ways to make coastal geoscience engineering more inclusive for women. But that's based on data as well, on quantitative data. But what I was going to say is that whatever we came out with is not only for coastal geosciences engineering, that's widely applicable, as you can see here. So again, I don't know why these graphics are not showing, but this is again a different sets of figures we had there about our women in coastal geoscience engineering network. And I would stop here, really. I'm tired just listening about all the things I have done.
Certainly very long and very varied career, Luciana. Extremely impressive.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm not sure about impressive.
It's very impressive. Here we go again with this imposter syndrome. Seems it doesn't matter what stage of your career you're at. You never see your own achievements for what they are. Believe me, they're very, very impressive. I'm really interested in the survey you did. I know you didn't have time to highlight everything, but I'm just wondering, what was the most surprising results of the survey for you?
Well, I think the surprising thing is that not finding a statistically significant difference between what people are experiencing, between the groups we looked. But I think that it's, issues with the sample size and the quantitative data. But as I said, the quantitative data, and I've looked at quantitative data all my life, and that's what I trust. But when you come to something like this, you have to look at both, really, because it's not necessarily, if you want to help people, it's not necessarily where the majority of people are, but where the most, where the ones that are struggling the most are. So, for example, I have colleagues that they don't have children, they are young, they live close to campus, but they are struggling, because their home was never meant to be a working space. And they cannot concentrate, they don't have a space to do things, And some other colleagues with children, they say, well, my husband works from home, I work from home, my children have to do their homeschooling. We compete for bandwidth in our internet. We compete for the computers we have at home, because, employers took a while to provide some help. I bought my own screen and keyboards and stuff like that, because I thought, well, I have to do something about it. And then later on, the university starts doing those sort of, or providing those type of support. So there's quite a huge difference. Also, for example, there were blogs that I wrote looking at the data only from respondents from Bournemouth University, only from colleagues. And you can see that people that live alone suffer a lot. Loneliness, isolation, for some people it's going to work is part of their social life, and engaging with colleagues at work and so on. So it's tough, you cannot put in graphs like this, you cannot yes, it's difficult to generalize things, really. So lots of people think lockdown brought lots of opportunities, and lots of people think brought lots of challenges.
It's very particular to people's own circumstances, you find.
Yeah, certainly is. There's one thing here. There's one thing here I put it. I was not going to show, but so one of the things we looked at is long-lasting changes as well. So changes to priority needs and personal relations, attitudes to work, and you see there are some statistical difference when you have this star on the side. Again, so women thinking more, or thinking that will have long-lasting changes considerably in their personal relations, and men perhaps less so, saying no long-lasting changes, or not sure. And towards work, and the number of people that have said, giving up, not doing this anymore is too much. I realize now that there are more important things. Some other people just deciding, well, I'm going to retire early. or change careers.
Mm. It would have been
It's
really
quite,
interesting
quite
to see
interesting.
it. Yeah, to see a survey like this even a year ago before anything could have been predicted, to see what people thought of the work-life balance in academia, to see how that's changed, because definitely people's ideas of what they want from their lives has certainly changed. Do you think there's anything in general we can do to improve the work-life balance in academia going forward?
So just based on the responses we got, so that's not my field, but it's based on the responses we got, lots of people are looking for more flexible working, more opportunities to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, people that had problems, of course, concentrating, stuff like that, when schools return, so there's a part of the problem that goes away, but also people want to work from home because you can stay with your family longer, you have less trouble traveling and so on. So mainly people think about flexible working, working from home, working flexible hours, reducing perhaps more pointless meetings and focusing on what is important.
Yeah, I think we'd all like that. Yeah, flexibility definitely is something going forward that hopefully can be a silver lining